Okay, today I'm going to be talking about male numbness. But first, I want to talk about Mount Everest, and you'll see how this connects. So, if you're anything like me, sometimes you go down long rabbit holes regarding topics that are totally irrelevant to your life. And one of those for me has been Mount Everest. No, I don't plan on climbing it. I've looked at doing the base camp trek. I actually had a friend do it a few years ago, and it is something that I would like to do in my lifetime, but I'm definitely not risking my life to climb Mount Everest. Fun fact, roughly 1% of anyone who's ever tried to climb Mount Everest has died, and it's not uncommon that they can't get the bodies down. So if you are climbing Mount Everest, you'll pass bodies that have been there for 10, 20, 30 years. It's pretty crazy, right? There are many reasons why people die climbing Mount Everest. You have high altitude sickness, falls, avalanches, and then simply just being exposed to the elements, the cold and the wind. And these factors can compound on each other because if you're not getting enough oxygen to your brain, you're more likely to make poor decisions. Some people will get summit fever where they will want to continue climbing up when really they should stop or go down. And eventually, this will lead to hypothermia. I had considered calling this episode Emotional Hypothermia because of the similarities to male numbness, but I didn't know if that would make sense to people. Here's where I will make that connection. So, when you first start experiencing mild hypothermia, you're still alert. People will feel quite a bit of pain in their fingers and their toes, and they may start to shiver, which is uncomfortable. It's our body's natural response to keeping us alive. But if you aren't able to warm your body back up and hypothermia progresses, you'll start to feel numb. People will become confused, start stumbling and mumbling, and even become apathetic to their situation. There are even accounts of people dying of hypothermia beginning to strip off their clothes. One of the theories is that paradoxically, they're interpreting the cold and numbness as warmth. So they're feeling a need to take off their clothes, which to an observer is totally irrational. And in the final stages of hypothermia, people become quite calm. It's thought that hypothermia in the latest stages is not a bad way to go because you're not very aware, semi-conscious, and eventually you drift off into sleep and die. So you might be asking yourselves, how does this relate to emotions? Here's my theory. Pain is one of our biggest motivators. It magnifies our needs when they're not being met. So when we're able to feel our pain, I see that as a good thing because we're alert. We have a chance to respond to it. It keeps us awake. But if it becomes too much, that's when we go numb. We can no longer feel. There's this sense of apathy. And from this place, it's really hard to help ourselves, and it's really difficult for others to help us because we can't really tell them what we need. We don't know, and we don't have that inner desire to confront it. As you know, men commit suicide at a much higher rate than women. I've even been here myself as a teenager. And so I have a theory that this is the place from which people make that decision. They just can't connect to life or others. They can't feel the love that others have for them, the care they have for themselves, their own dreams and aspirations, their own hope. And so I think the answer to this common question, why would someone do this? I believe it's that they're numb. Now, it's still a small percentage of people that make that decision, but there are other versions of slow deaths that I see men experiencing. One can be addiction, which is a way to keep yourself in a state of numbness, changing your brain chemistry. I've also been there myself. Another one can be staying habitually busy. It can feel too painful to slow down and reflect. So if our attention is always spread thin, always putting out fires, our brain's constantly moving, then we don't have to feel, and that can keep us in a state of numbness. And there are different versions, and I think most people do this on some level, whether it's mild, medium, or severe. But my point is to plant a flag so that you can see that pain is a good thing. It means that you can still feel. And obviously, if you're feeling a lot of pain consistently, you want to get help. But even having the ability to do that is a good thing. Because if you cross over into a state of numbness, consistent numbness, it becomes harder and harder to make informed decisions. When clients come in to see me and they're in a lot of pain and I can see it and I can feel them, I try to remind them, this is good. You're feeling it, you're processing it, you're making a choice. We can work with this. If a client comes in and they have a flat affect and it doesn't seem like they care and their story isn't making much sense because it's just the logic, that's when I'm more concerned. Now, the good news is there are a lot of ways that we can warm ourselves up. Talking about our feelings with a professional or a friend, that can warm us up. Exercising, getting outside, yoga, meditation, practicing good hygiene and self-care, nutrient-rich food, lots of water. All of these things can help warm us up, but we have to get better at recognizing where we're at. I know for me, even though I live a pretty stress-free life, I'm rarely overwhelmed. If I haven't been moved to tears in more than a couple weeks, that usually means that I'm freezing up some. I'm pretty susceptible to numbness, and mine will manifest in a more depressive state. It probably looks mild on the surface, but I can tell when I'm off my center, and Jenny can definitely tell when I'm off my center. And so if I'm feeling like, I don't really care about working on our business, or I'm not feeling excited about meeting with clients, which is something I care a lot about, that's usually a clue that there's something that needs to be felt into. And I don't do this perfectly. It's a balancing act that I will probably do for the rest of my life. And that's why I have an accountability setup. Jenny and I have an unspoken agreement to really check in every day. I have a personal men's group that I'm a part of. We meet every 2 weeks. That's another way that I check in. And then I meet with a coach on average once a month. That's my current setup. Now, when I was first getting sober, I went to a 1 hour long AA meeting every single day for 90 days. And that was after doing a 60-day inpatient program because I needed to be doing that on a daily basis somehow to keep myself engaged to my purpose, to have time to sit and reflect quietly in that meeting space. And I was also working with an AA sponsor and life coach. So the reason I'm saying that is that sometimes in the beginning, if you're really struggling with numbness, you probably need some type of daily practice. And that will be a mix of some things that are just you, some things that are you and a mentor, and some things that are community-based. If you're not feeling totally stable, in touch with yourself, or if you feel like you're not on the path that you want to be on. And then eventually you can scale that back. That would be my suggestion. I'm wondering what else I want to say about this topic. I'd like to leave you with a few action steps. The first is this, very simple and specific. If you think that you have trouble feeling, I'd suggest setting a goal to practice for 5 minutes per day every single day. This is basically a meditation, but with a specific purpose. Set a timer for 5 minutes on your phone, sit quietly, and ask yourself, how am I really feeling? And just notice what happens. Look for fear, look for sadness, look for anger, look for joy and gratitude, and just notice what you see and feel. You may even want to write this down, just a few sentences. Now, if you can feel anything, good. If you don't feel like you can feel anything, that's still okay. You could be having one of those days. But over the course of the next couple weeks, look at your data. If you're like, damn, I don't really feel like I can feel anything, that's a problem. You need help. I mean, if you want to be an embodied, emotionally available man, some people can get by without that. And then if you feel a mix of other emotions, I'd suggest feeling into what feels like it needs attention. This practice might be enough to get the ball rolling. Or you might realize that you haven't processed a death or a breakup, or you want to practice feeling more gratitude, or you want to really work hard to connect with your kids better or your wife. This is probably one of the simplest and best ways to just get a read on how you're feeling and what you want and what you need. Another suggestion I have for you is to think about what strategies you use to avoid feeling. And it's not because you need to change these overnight. It's just a way to bring more awareness to how you operate. So if you like to play video games or watch porn every night or work on never-ending home projects, whatever it is, just ask yourself, is this something I use to avoid feeling? And once you know that, you'll be more likely to create your own interventions by noticing, hey, I think I'm actually stressed right now. I don't really think this thing I'm doing needs attention right now. How can I better take care of myself in this moment? Sometimes it's food, water, nap, taking a 5 minute break. The more aware you are of your own internal state, the better you'll be able to balance yourself so that you don't get too far off your center. Because for a lot of guys, what off their center looks like is being grumpy and irritable and cold and rigid and frankly just a pain in the ass to be around. You don't want that. I don't want to be like that either. Hopefully this was helpful today. Male numbness is a real problem. My intuition tells me that most men are dealing with moderate to severe numbness coupled with a third grade education in emotions. So this is an area that we as men really need to step up in. And what's really cool about this, I've noticed this with many of my clients, is that the more that you learn and grow, the more that you can teach. You can teach your kids and your friends, even through your own modeling. And this helps you feel like a leader that actually has real impact on others, which I think is what a lot of men want. And the world needs you. Okay, that's all I have to say for today. Remember to like, subscribe, comment, follow, and even share this episode with friends, family, if you think they need to hear it. This is important stuff. I'll see you next week.